So, again, hello. I'm happy that everybody is still alive after my keynote and able to talk. Thank you very much. So, what we're going to do now to the end of this wonderful day, we learned a lot about different things, and we want to wrap up with a little discussion about especially track and trace technologies and logistics. And therefore, we have three wonderful people here. I'm just the host, and everybody will introduce himself. And Bridget was on the stage, but please again say hello.
My name is Bridget Graywall, and I am the Director of Continuous Improvement for Magna International in the United States.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Ruvers. I am Senior Vice President of Industrial and Automotive Sales for North America. I'm based in the Detroit area. I've been with Orbis my entire career, 26 or 27 years, and have worked in a number of roles in our automotive group in North America mainly, but also heavily involved in China as well as in Europe.
My name is Sels. I'm the founder and CEO of Contraload. We're a pooling company. We pool Orbis products in the beverage can industry, and we're also supporting Orbis today in Europe, maybe future states as well, with their foldable large container pool in the automotive industry.
Thank you very much. So you were a listener today. What was the most impressive thing, or what was the thing that stood out for you from this day?
Well, I think it's always good to get an update on technology. So I think we will be calling Alex. But I think we have some trials for you. So that will be interesting. But also a takeaway from the HR aspect of working with people around the leave plan. We are doing something similar, so I think we can steal a few things from that as well. So I think I've learned something from everybody. But mostly the technology thing sticks out. The technology,
the track and trace that you were talking about also. How important? I mean, it's very important, of course, for the supplier. But how deep is the impact in the supply industry with track and trace? Because it's changing a lot at the moment, as you showed.
Yeah, it is. And I have a consortium in the United States with Ford, GM, and Chrysler and Magna on the team, and we estimate that it's going to be about $6 million a year. In savings if we can actually get this under control and be able to do that. And that would be from labor and, of course, loss and predictability on the containers, on the trucks, so we don't have to do expedites and get into expendable packaging and things like that. So it's gigantic. And if we could get that to work across the globe, to have returnable containers going across the ocean would be, with consistency and regularity, that would be, a real big step in the right direction.
So tier one suppliers like you, Magna, are setting standards in that way. So you're implementing the technologies, and as you showed us, you're experimenting also a lot with technologies, and then there is something new again. So how much energy and how much time costs you to experiment with all these things, and how much energy and time costs you to go to your suppliers and tell them, hey, we have to use this or that technology?
Well, luckily I have a big pool to play with of plants. I think we have like 350 as of today, and all the plants are struggling with the same thing. Unfortunately, there's just one of me, so I have to use different strategies, including all the knowledge from the supply base, to be able to get, because we're not getting exactly the right opinion from each supply. Like an RFID supplier wants to sell RFID, obviously, and a BLE supplier wants to sell BLE. So to be able to sort that out and be able to make sense of what I should focus on and spend my time on is difficult. And you have to really dig into it. And that's why I'm running all these trials, because I can't just trust the word of the salesperson that this is the best technology out there, because they all are, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Dan, from your perspective?
Yeah, to build on that, as you could see in Bridget's presentation, but then a number of the other things that we talked about, is there's a lot of complexity around this topic. And we were talking earlier how the different companies that offer these different technologies, they are very definitely not unbiased. They're quite biased in terms of what they think is best, and they obviously think that their solution is the best. So there's a lot of complexity and a lot of unanswered questions around this area as to, at the end of the day, years from now, what truly is going to be the most efficient and effective technology in this area.
Yeah, but you're, I mean, as a supplier, you're also working for very different companies. You're not also working for Magna. You're also working for some manufacturers directly. So everybody has different demands. How hard it is to follow all these technology tracks, and it must cost you also a lot.
Yeah, I don't know that it costs Orbis a lot necessarily. I do think that it creates a significant amount of complexity for tier one suppliers. So tier ones have, like I mentioned earlier, they have the different technology companies trying to sell them products, and then their customers, the OEMs around the world, are all looking at different solutions. So Ford may be doing one thing, Toyota may be doing a different thing, Nissan doing a different thing. So for a tier one like Magna, and obviously Magna is very, very large, so it's probably even more difficult for smaller tier ones, you have, I would say, a lot of conflicting information coming from your technology suppliers. You have a lot of conflicting information coming from your customers. So it's a difficult topic right now.
And it costs time.
Sure.
Actually.
Right.
So
Right.
Time's money, as we as we all know, an old saying in
Exactly.
capitalism. But I just want to open it up a bit, or to the audience. Who has made the same experience like Dan, for example, that it's cost him a lot of time working with track and trace technologies in their company?
I think one thing that can maybe solve this issue is we don't know the answer. What is the right technology? If we look at video recorders, we started with the beta disc and then the VHS, and you had to choose which one. And you made a bet on the one, and then the bet maybe won or lost. But if you've got something that's interchangeable, if you have a load carrier that can be fitted with the different technologies, and then next year when something changes, you can discard the old one and insert a new one. That can be something that is, especially from a load carrier manufacturing point of view, maybe a game changer where you don't need to commit to one, but you can have the ability to change from one to another as it evolves.
I agree, and I think what you just said builds into Sensa, what we saw today. A removable device that can be altered, changed over time, so that carrier stays the same, but the technology inside it, the batteries inside it, et cetera, can evolve. That's a very good point.
That you're talking about the hardware. I think what you mentioned earlier, call it software. But if companies don't, even competitors don't start working together with a bigger goal, and sustainability is quite a good one to gather around and say, hey, we got to do this together. And you converge, so you start really working together in projects. We are, as a pooling company, currently working with other pooling companies. You could say competitors, or you could say people on the same track, because we are together around one subject, which is we want to facilitate reuse, which is very sustainable. So if competitors can come together, develop an IT system, what we're doing, fund it together towards that bigger goal, facilitating reuse, then we're on the right track. And that's what we are trying to achieve, and I think that's exactly what you need as well, is that you can start believing your suppliers because they're working together in a way. And I think that's the lesson that we can take from Don's speech, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I learned in the past years there are a lot of projects, for instance, for intelligent pellets here in Europe, and what I see is the development goes to think about 80% up to pre-tests, and then it stops and no one is interested what happens in the last 20%. That's the most complex 20%, because it's what you say, to realize in real systems. And the problem is we almost think in creating new ideas, but the main thing of digitalization is the infrastructure.
Yeah, but it's also the implementation, what you say. So 80% you do an 80% development.
Infrastructure is, for instance, the pooling systems
Yeah.
and so on.
So where this is, I think, a bit of a question also to your side, because you're experimenting with a lot of stuff, but then the last 20% implementation is the costly stuff. How do you deal with that, or how do you cope with that?
Everything's got to have a cost justification. So that's the last 20% that you're talking about. You do the information, you gather the data, and then you put the cost justification together. And if it's cost justified, we'll go ahead with it. But then you learn after that and say, okay, BLE was cost justified for tracking tools, but now we found out it's not cost justified for tracking containers because they're still getting lost. It's not helping us. And so that last 20% is, in my case, the business case every time. And then that's when it gets all the eyes on it. And then people, I put it together as thoroughly as I can so they can throw darts at it and say, what about this? What about this? What about that? So that, it's not just left on me to think about everything. I have a whole team of people that can help me, throw those darts and make sure it's there. But the good thing is that once that's cost justified, and even if you're saving, $100,000 a year on one plant or something like that, my teams are ready to go and they're in for it. And so it's just a matter of making sure that the data that I present to them is understandable and it's real. And that's it.
There was another question there?
I think part of this, we didn't start off by creating hardware because we wanted to create hardware. We wanted to create software. But as Apple taught us, if you want to create really good software, you must create the hardware, because that gives you more tools to work with as a software developer, so that we can find a solution that is sustainable in the long run. So where the blockchain, for example, becomes a really interesting idea is that different suppliers, so Magna or your clients or whoever, can slot into the same platform, almost like an operating system, a little bit like a Mac OS X or something for logistics. And you can have your own carved out environment in that, but another person has a carved out environment in that as well, and there could be certain things that cross over, but they can't see into your data and you can't see into their data, but you can utilize the same tools. I think this is what's going to drive it forward. So from our point of view, this is where we want to go. We're creating the hardware because it is not there. So if we want to get to the point where we want to be, we must have sensible hardware. That's only the first step. The next step is to get to this place where we all can communicate on a similar platform.
And then from there, to build upon that is, continuous improvement. The opportunity for continuous improvement in this area as time goes on is tremendous. The learnings, from the next couple of years will be tremendous to grow from.
Jesse, you wanted to say something?
Well, usually, the most mature companies, they tend to look at total cost of ownership of a project, but 90% of the companies where you come, they still, if the saving is not clear on the table, they won't even go to the next 20 or the last 20% of the project, which is a showstopper. That's why I like the approach of taking a new idea, new technology, and putting it in a brand new type of bin, which is a bit more on the high end, where that cost can be absorbed. So the end discussion will not be the cost of the tag. It will actually work, I think, in these kind of circumstances. And if it gathers a bit of traction, then over time, cost going down, and the sensors will be really cheap.
So we talk.
Then we can start putting it into pellets and other stuff.
So we talk now about the sensors technology and maybe future technology, but how much of an impact has track and trace technology and sustainability in saving the environment?
My opinion is the sustainability savings through track and trace are the sky is the limit. when it comes to things like, simply reducing the number of miles driven for a specific OEM or for a specific assembly plant. Massive sustainability opportunity there. When it comes to what Bridget mentioned earlier about a tier one supplier running out of packaging because the right packaging is not in the right place at the right time. Therefore having to go into backup expendable corrugated cardboard or wood, big sustainability issue there. And then lastly, the ability for track and trace technology to allow tier ones and OEMs to better utilize the space in a truck or in a sea container. So, everybody in this room knows that if you were to go to an assembly plant, a good percentage of the trucks that arrive at that assembly plant are not fully utilized. OEMs and tier ones are shipping a huge amount of air, and this can definitely help in that area.
And to put that in perspective, so I have those 136 plants in North America, and they all have half-empty trucks or three-quarter empty or one-quarter empty trucks. And my plants won't work with each other. They won't share their assets because they're not tracked right now. Once we get the tracking in place, then the plant said, okay, now we know if somebody's taking our containers. Even though they are all the same company, they all have their own profit loss, and they have to talk to their accountants about that if they can't, their Sarbanes-Oxley and all those things that they have to be justified to. So this is going to be immensely important for me because it's going to stop the expedites, it's going to stop the expendable packaging. But what it also allows me to do is to combine my trucks together with two Magna companies' containers on them, and be able to get the one containers to the right location and the other containers to the other location.
I mean, freight logistics is still also in Europe still a nightmare with the amount of empty trucks that are running around. I know that, but shouldn't be like in the interest of your suppliers to work together because they're saving money. I mean, if they would like work together on packing the trucks full with their stuff and making your life easier, they also save money because there's maybe one or two trucks less that they have to pay for.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that is true. But if you don't have the assets designated to one company or another company, then you can't have accountability. If I send a truckload of 208 containers to one Magna plant, and that Magna plant takes all 208 off when they were only supposed to take 100 off, right now we can't tell.
Okay.
So when there's track and trace, we can tell that they were moved at, they left this location and they went to that location, and the 100 that were supposed to keep going, didn't go.
Yeah.
And so we can get those, alerts and things that'll tell us we have a little process issue.
But are these tags that you show us also like normally when somebody put the stuff from the lorry, they should scan it. They should see, oh, these are not the containers that used to be here, or should be
Well,
here.
they might look exactly the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you still have the tags. Don't they scan the tags when they upload them?
No. On empty containers, we don't
Okay.
identify. They're not even identified anywhere. There's
Okay.
no barcode on them. There's nothing on them.
Okay.
Right today.
Today. So that would be something.
Hey, we're all for shared use of assets. That's pooling. So, need help?
Are you going to tell me the truth?
Tell me the truth, exactly. Yeah. Questions about that? Yeah, here we go. I thought that.
Hello, hello everybody. I don't want to ask specifically to some of you. I teach supply chain management in some university here in Europe and in China, and so I will bother you in asking something a little bit academic. Okay, so I heard from you that sustainability is very important in the supply chain. And to that, you also introduced the circular economy, the recycling, reuse, etc. On the other side, from the manufacturer's point of view, there is a big attention on cost and speed. And in all this scenario, sometimes aspects like logistics is seen a little bit not really as a core business for some companies. And so what I'm seeing, recently is that we are going, as users of some products, we are trying to, let's say, I see that we are going to lose the concept of ownership, like our smartphones. What we are going to, the users are going to buy the service rather than own the phone, because technology is so fast, and as a user, I don't want to buy every 3 months a new phone, etc. So this is going to be for cars, for dishwashers, and everything. Now, since here there are manufacturers, car manufacturers and suppliers, what do you see in terms of these objects, the containers? Are you seeing that probably you as Magna, that you, instead of buying containers, you might in the future buy the service from a supplier, and the supplier will own the container and just offer a service? They will take care about, everything like impact and software and everything. So they will offer you a service rather than a piece of plastic. And so they will manage with their know-how how to make a cheap and good container rather than sell a container.
Yeah, we use pooling often in different ways. We use, Orbis has a sister company called RPM that we have Magna-owned pooled containers that they coordinate for us and they run them. And there is no tracking software except for somebody on the phone calling my plants and saying, you were supposed to send me 100, you only sent me 50, and that's one way. Another instance that we're going to be able to rent the containers, CHEP is moving over to America, but because the culture is much different than it is here in Europe, we don't have a respect for the containers, the empty containers, the way that you do in Europe. We would just take the containers and put them in a corner, and when they get in our way, then we would call CHEP and say, come and get them, and then you get a big bill at the end of the month. And that would not be, that would not happen in America. They would not accept that bill. And so we are working with CHEP and with other pooling companies to try to create a strategy where it would work in America. Because although it seems to be working well in Europe, that would not fly in the United States.
But then it's an interesting question, because as you said, everybody goes into, so you build a hardware, put a software on, and then you sell the whole service. So would that something Orbis would be like interesting, like building the containers, put a sensor in, proprietary, whatever, with their own software, and then selling also the track and tracing software to the company?
Yes. Yep, absolutely. Yep. Bridget mentioned we have a sister company, Orbis RPM, Reusable Packaging Management, and that is largely what RPM does. They manage the flows of reusable packaging, and as technology evolves, the technology that Orbis RPM uses will obviously evolve with that. And then my other response to the question is, a lot of this comes down to cost, and Bridget alluded to this. In that CHEP example of a container or stack of containers that are sitting idle for a long period of time, the tier 1 supplier is going to get billed for that. So very clearly the tier 1 or the OEM, as they choose pooling versus not pooling, or choosing certain pooling companies, it's going to be driven at the end of the day by service and by cost, just like everything else. And right now, in many cases, the costs are prohibitive because of what Bridget mentioned.
Maybe the reason is because you use CHEP and not Contraload.
I didn't say anything.
But it's, I mean, you're dealing with pooling, so pooling is also like highly software.
Software
is relying on highly
software can tell you a lot of things where something is, but
the
today
pooling is
people
also
bring it back.
logistics pooling is a thing is going to be very, very important, especially when we talk again about sustainability. So track and trace and selling the servers to Magna is one thing. Make their life easier by pooling stuff is another thing.
Well, that's what we do every day. But today, software, hardware, they can tell you where something is, but someone still has to plan the truck. Somebody still has to verify whether the physical stock is actually there. So I think buying your own stuff and managing your own stuff versus using a pooling company. All the others are fine as well, which is a shared use of assets, where in peak moments the other one uses more of it, the other, but there must be a guaranteed availability, otherwise it never works. And that should over time be cheaper than everybody buying it themselves, because then you need 20 to 30% more equipment. I'm sure Orbis doesn't mind if they have to produce 20 to 30% more equipment, but on the other hand, if you look at sustainability and total cost of ownership, then sharing assets it's not a trend, it's the future, as you correctly mentioned. So it will happen more and more, but today, with interest rates being very low, there is more a trend of I'll buy it myself anyway because money's cheap and there's plenty to go around. But once that starts changing, I think people will shift more to, I'm not going to buy it. CapEx is not going to be as easy as it is now already, but it's not always easy. And that will again push people more towards a rental or a pooling solution, I think.
And until we get the tracking in place, my plants won't trust the rental program because they can't trust themselves not to lose the container. And so if you can rent a container, let's say it costs $10 a year or something to rent the container, but if you lose it, you have to pay $200 and you lose 50%. That's not a good pooling system for right now. Now, if we had the track and trace in there and we could tell that the containers moved over to the supplier by someone on third shift that just didn't know what they were doing, we could go get the containers back and then we would be whole again. But time after time after time, we have rented containers, we have pooled containers, we have tried to use somebody else's containers and we lose them, just like our own. And so it's not, the business plan never works right now. But
it's not your core business.
Absolutely.
That's a key. I think people who are doing nothing else from morning till evening the same, concentrate and focus on that. Oh, sorry. I finished already.
Well, right now in America, there's no, like when Chep rents the containers to us, and I'm sorry I'm using a competitor because you're not there
No,
yet.
it's just
When Chep rents us the containers, they don't track them for us. They don't, if we lose them,
You pay for it.
that's it. There is no, RPM tracks the containers for us, but we own them. So see how the two are not mixed together.